All right, so again, we're just going over that 3.2 homework. So we're starting with these four, which I actually think might have been the same that was on that other worksheet. So those four should have been easy. Did anybody have any questions on these first four problems? Remember that your planes might be looking different. Like I named one RSX, you could have named it differently than I did. The segments could have been named like the other direction, FT and TS are the same. Again, I think we went over this yesterday. Does anyone have any questions on those first four? Okay, I'm gonna keep it moving to the next few, okay? Here's 5 through 10. It says classify the relationship, and it also tells you to label the transversal. So make sure you know what the transversal is. If you don't understand why I wrote N or P or M, please let me know. Again, this first page was a review of the material that we've done for 2 days. So hopefully we feel pretty confident about identifying those angle relationships, but let me know if you want me to go over any of them. Anything 5 through 10? Take one more second. Okay. And the last part of this page also says name the transversal and identify this special name for each angle pair. So make sure that you get those four right as well. I know some of these diagrams were a little bit funny, but hopefully in that 3.2 section that we've done, it will make a little bit more sense. It should be a little bit clearer. Anybody questions on these four? Give me a little thumb thermometer. Where do we feel about identifying angle relationships? Thumbs up means I feel awesome. I got this. Thumbs in the middle means I need a little bit more practice. Thumbs down means what class is this? No one says what class is this? Awesome. Okay. Let's move on to the next page. This was the new stuff. Now these first 18 problems, I just wanted us to use our angle measures. If you remember yesterday, we learned that the lines are parallel, corresponding angles are congruent, alternate interior, alternate exterior, etc. Is this zoomed in enough, or do you want me to go in farther? Is that fine? Okay, perfect. I'll just leave that up there for a little while you check it. So if you see angles that are vertical, they're congruent. If because these lines are parallel, if they're corresponding, alternate interior, alternate exterior, all of those are congruent. When you start getting to consecutive interior and consecutive exterior, as well as linear pairs are all supplementary. So if you think about this, if I give you one angle measure, you're really only using that angle measure or its supplement. So the number plus the original number given to you that will add up to 180. So 70 and 110 should be all of your answers for 1 through 6. 180 should be all of your answers for 7 through 12. And for 13 through 18, all of your answers should be 75 to 105. Again, this was something that you guys were trying to do the other day that I was like, oh, we don't know if we can do that yet. Now we do know that because the lines are parallel. Can I explain anything here 1 through 18? Okay. All right, now I think we get to like probably the hardest part of the page. The bottom four, I need you to write the statement, write an equation, and solve it. Okay, so we're going to do these one at a time. Okay. So first thing we're going to do is worry about what angle relationships we can identify and go from there. So I'm going to start with, I've got 5x and 40. I know 40 is maybe in kind of a funny spot, but it's in reference to this angle right here. So 40 and then 5x. Those are a linear pair because they're both on the same line. They don't need a transversal. So they are going to be supplementary. Another kind of hint that I don't know if I really led on to you guys yesterday, but the only relationship between these angles is going to be congruent or it's going to be supplementary. And while you can't necessarily look at a picture and be like, oh, well, they look congruent, that's good enough. 40 and 5x do not at all look congruent, so you cannot assume that they're congruent. It's a better assumption to say, oh, they don't look congruent, they are going to be sunk. So just something to kind of think about as well. So they're on the same line, they're gonna be supplementary, so we add them up and set them equal to 180. I needed to see the statement, I needed to see the equation, and then I don't care if you skip some of the steps, but I definitely need to see the final solution. Okay, anybody questions on that first part? Okay, next thing we wanted to look at is I want to look at how 3y minus 1 relates to either of those angles. 3y minus 1 does not have a relationship with 40. Those are just in two funny spots that they don't have a relationship together. So instead, I knew that 5x and 3y minus 1 were alternate exterior angles. And so I wrote the statement, if lines are parallel, then alternate exterior angles are congruent. That means I'd set them equal to each other, but I had to make sure that I plugged a number in for that x. And that's that number that I found before. So I took 28 and I plugged that in for x. If you have two variables, you can't solve it. So I needed to make sure to solve for that x first in order to find this y easily. And then I solved for y and I got 47. And again, this one I have an x and a y, so I've got two statements, I've got two equations, I've got two answers. Okay, I'll try and keep that up. Probably not very well. Is anybody still looking at number 19? Okay, I'm gonna keep moving then. I'm gonna jump down to 21 just because we're on that side. 21, and again, I'm gonna kind of go through these slowly. You will have more practice of this tonight's homework. So if you're like still looking at this and you're like, I'm doing great now that we're walking through this together, but could I do this on my own? I'm not sure. We're gonna find out because we're gonna do more practice on it today and you're gonna do more practice on it tonight. I first look at my x's, 9x plus 21 and 11x minus 1. Those are corresponding angles. And so if lines are parallel, corresponding angles are congruent. So we set those equal to each other and then we solve. For your y, you can solve that a couple different ways. You can see that 5y minus 5 is a consecutive exterior angle with 9x plus 21. Or you could instead do a linear pair, which is what I did. 11x minus 1 and 5y minus 5 are a linear pair. Either way is fine, but again, I needed to have found my x, or I needed to have found one of my variables in order to plug in and solve for the other one. If you didn't get this, instead of copying everything that I have, at least write down either the equation or maybe the statement, so then you can do the rest on your own, because I'm going to keep it moving. Okay, does anyone have any questions? I'm going to go back up to 20 then. Okay, so 20, the first thing, I already have my x's highlighted. The x's was what I did first. Those are alternate interior angles. So since they're alternate interior, I set them equal to each other and I solved. And then my 7x and my 6y plus 20 were a linear pair. So I added those up to 180 and then I solved. Again, plugging that x into my equation. All right, looking at that last one then, same idea. This time I had alternate interior angles again, and I had a pair of linear pair right there. So alternate interior angles are congruent, so 3x minus 3 equals 60, and then linear pairs is up, 4y plus 4 plus 60 equals 180. So again, if those were hard for you, if you got something wrong, remember the biggest thing is our statement first, and then that statement helps us write our equation, and then you can solve from there. Questions for me? I think that the biggest question is just let's do more practice on this, right? Let's kind of keep rolling through this. That is all we're doing today. When you tear this paper out of your homework packet, that next paper is what we're going to do. So we're not looking at notes today. You can have those out to help you, but I'm not writing any into your note packet. We are just going to get into the next of our homework. So go ahead, tear that paper out, put your name on it, pass it forward. If you're still finishing it or still correcting it, just hold on to it. You might have some time to work on it by yourself and give it to me later. Yay. Does that help? Okay. Maybe pass that on. I will. I just have to do a little easier and then yeah, because today we just. But today we're just doing more practice and this video will be on later, Bailey, so you can get caught up. All right. Yeah, go get it. I'll just go to Schoology and get it. All right, I assume all the homeworks are passed forward and I assume that you have this paper on your desk. Are those good assumptions to have? I don't need that. Are those good assumptions to have? Perfect. Homework. This is all for me. Will you do homework on your desk or did it go that way? Perfect. I took those already. My mom. Yeah. You guys have homework? Oh, I haven't done attendance yet. Jake is here. Only Sammy's not here. Okay, I'm gonna do that really quick. Can you guys look at me? Look at me, stop talking. Look at me. Do you guys have this paper out? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Okay. We're gonna do this paper and I think we're gonna do all of the highlighted ones. And then I'm gonna kind of give you free rein to try some on your own, okay? If we have some time, we may reconvene in a little bit and do a few more, but we will just kind of see. Let's go ahead and flip your paper over. Let's not start on the proofs. Let's start on the ones that we were just working on to see if we can kind of keep our brains fresh on what we were just doing. Okay. Actually, we can probably do a third one of these. Okay, I don't know. Can you see this on your paper? Do you see these little blue corners that I have on my screen? Do you have something that looks like that on your paper? All right, is there one other one? I have two of them highlighted. I'll do a third one. Is there a third one up here that you think that looks scary that you would rather do with me than by yourself? 1, 2, 3, or 4. Anyone have a preference? 4. Okay, perfect. So we'll do that one as well. Okay, let's start on the first corner box that we've got up here. So we are going to do these 3 together. These are just like we were doing before. So like I said, when we just finished our homework, we need to do our statements and we need to solve. So let's start by doing our X's first. Okay, so looking at our X's, what's my, that's probably not a good idea. Let's look all the way at 2x and 90 and X. What do you know about all 3 of those angles? Oh no, this is alarming. Yes, Sam. They form 180, good. I'm not gonna write a linear pair because pair implies 2. So I will probably just write like angle addition. And probably supplementary just because it's a little bit funny. I don't have a good rule for this one, but I know I'm gonna find X by adding them all up to 180. So we are going to do 2x plus 90 plus X equals 180. Is anyone confused on why Sam knew that those all added to 180? Nope, okay, perfect. Right, we're gonna combine our like terms. We're gonna do 2x and X to get 3x plus 90 equals 180. We're gonna minus 90 from both sides, and we're gonna divide by 3, so we get 30. All right, awesome. We gotta find Y and Z, so let's keep it moving. Anyone have any idea on how I'm gonna find Y? What's an angle that's related to Y? What do you see up there that we can do?
X.
X, I like X. Trey, how are X and 2Y related? They do look similar. I'm gonna tell you they have a relationship. Trey picked the right one. Who can tell me what's my relationship, Lila?
Interior.
Awesome, alternate interior. And what's my statement with alternate interior?
If lines are congruent, then alternate interior.
If lines are parallel, then alternate interior are congruent. Good, you got the meat of it correct. Alternate interior angle is congruent. Now, these lines are parallel. I didn't mention this earlier, but because we've got these little arrows right here, so we know that those lines are parallel. So that means I'm going to assume that they're. So we can say 2y is equal to x. Well, we know that x is 30. And so I can divide both sides to get y by itself, and I get y equals 15. Great job. All right, and then let's end with z. How do we find z, or what's an angle that z is related to? Two y. How are z and 2y related? Linear pair. Awesome. What's our statement with linear pair? Good. We'll say linear pair sum. We'll say linear pair sum. And so just like Michael said, we're going to add them up and set them equal to 180. Now, instead of writing 2y plus z, we're going to plug that number that we just found in for y. So I'm going to plug 15 in for that y. So we'll do 2 times 15 plus z equals 180. So 2 times 15 is 30. And then we'll minus that 30 from both sides, so z equals 150. All right, notice how for each one that we solved, we have a statement, we have an equation, and then we solved it, all right? Let's jump down to the next one that I wanted to do. So I think the one kind of catty corner to that one. Anybody questions so far? Okay. Let's jump down here. Which variable should I solve for first? Which variable should I solve for first? X, very good. Why, Jada?
They're corresponding.
They're corresponding. We have two expressions with X in them and they're corresponding, so we're gonna write our statement. If lines are parallel, then corresponding angles are, what are corresponding angles? Are they congruent or sub? Congruent, It's hard to trick you there. Corresponding angles are congruent. So we're gonna set them equal to each other. So let's say 5x minus 5 is equal to 4x plus 10. Minus 4x from both sides. Add 5 to both sides. And I get x equals 15. Okay, perfect. Everybody good so far? Okay, now let's do our y. What is, which x do you want to use and what's my relationship between the y angle and the x angle? Which one should we use? We use 5x minus 5. How are those two angles related? How are those two angles related, guys? What'd you say? Sorry, what'd you say? Angles can't be parallel, just lines.
Oh, it's, yeah.
That sounds so silly, but we say that all the time. So remember, lines are parallel, angles can be congruent or they're gonna be supplementary. Reminder, these are my lines that I'm worried about right here, this line and this line. And my transversal is right here. So if I'm looking at, sometimes it's helpful to like redraw these lines so you actually see what my relationship is. How are these two angles related?
Yeah.
They add to 180. Do you remember what the name of their relationship is? That's another word for add to 180. When I say angle relationship, I'm looking for like alternate exterior, vertical angles, those kind of words. Does anyone help us out? Not consecutive interior. They're not skew. I heard it. Linear pair. Now, we could have had a consecutive interior angle if we used the other x. So if I had used this angle instead, 4x plus 10 and 6y minus 4, those are consecutive interior angles because they are both on the inside of the transversal and there are the inside of the two lines that are parallel and they're on the same side of the transversal. The problem is here when we use these two, they are just two angles on one line. So remember, two angles on one line is just a linear pair. I love that we knew that they were supplementary though, so that means we're going to add them up and set them equal to 180. So we'll say 5x minus 5 plus 6y minus 4 equals 180. Except, oh, instead of writing x, we can actually write that number. We can write 15. Gotta move that over a little bit. 15. So 5 times 15 minus 5 plus 6y minus 4 equals 180. You guys okay with that so far? All right, let's start algebraing this out. I've got 75 minus 5 plus 6y minus 4 equals 180. I'm gonna do 75 minus 5 is 70, minus 4 is 66. 6y plus 66 equals 180. And if I do 180 minus 66, is that 114? And then 114 divided by 6 is 19. Okay, perfect. Okay. How are we doing on that so far? You ready to do the last one together? Okay. I'm gonna go down to the very last one. This is the last one of these that we'll do together, and then we'll jump to the front and do some proofs together, okay? So I'm gonna jump down here. I basically have a parallelogram, but we have not learned about parallelograms, so we can think of this a couple different ways. If I think about the x's first, I really need this line and this line and this line. We could actually do the x's and y's kind of simultaneously. It doesn't really matter which one goes first, but we'll just do x's first since we've been doing them first. What's my relationship between these two x angles? What are they? What was it? Exactly, Michael. They're consecutive interior. They're right next to each other. They're on the inside of the two lines. So those are my consecutive interior angles. So we'll write our statement. If lines are parallel, then what do we know about consecutive interior angles? They are supplementary. Very good. So if we know those are consecutive interior angles and that they are sup, then we're going to add them up to equal 180. So 5x plus 11x plus 4 equals 180. Add my x's together, I get 16x plus 4 equals 180. We're going to minus 4 on both sides. And we're going to divide by 16. I believe that's 11. Perfect. Anybody questions on the x's so far? All right, let's do the y's. I'm going to argue that we can do the same two lines that are parallel. I'm just going to move my transversal over here to now think about my y's. What's my relationship between these y's? consecutive interior. It's the same thing as what we just did, right? We just have a new transversal. So we're gonna do the exact same thing. I'm gonna write the exact same statement again. Or if you'd rather, you can do little arrows and say, okay, I'm gonna set them both up, but I will get in the habit of writing both statements, does not matter. And that helps me kind of get in my brain that we're doing consecutive interior angles and they are still supplementary. So I will do 5y plus 5 plus 13y minus 5 equals 180. Now those 5s are going to cancel each other out, and so I get 18y equals 180, and then y equals 10. Okay, awesome. How we feeling? Feeling better than when you walked in the room today on this stuff? All right, there's 3 more of those that you'll do on your own, but I want to flip the paper over to the proofs. Let's talk proofs for a little bit, and then I'll let you work for the rest of time, okay? So flip your papers over. We're gonna do 2 or 3 proofs. We will see. We're definitely gonna do proof number 1. And then we might do 1 or both of these proofs down here. I think you're good on 2 and 3 because those have some pieces given to you. Does that sound fair? So I want to kind of do the proofs that are mostly blank. So let's start on this first one, okay? Knowing nothing else, I think you can fill in 3 of these 10 boxes. What's 1 box that you can fill in? Given, good. So in the first statement box, I'm going to write L is parallel to N. And then we can also write given for reason box number 1. Okay, so those are 2 of my boxes I filled in. I think there's 1 more you can fill in. Sam? The prove box, that last box. Measure of angle 2 plus measure of angle 7 equals 180. Let me jump out for this proof for a second because there's a bunch of different ways we can do it. Let me see how I did it last year really quick. All right, I'm good. Now, on the reason I went to go check this proof is that you could do this a bunch of different ways. I could have more steps or less steps to so to fill the box I want. I'm going to kind of lead you through this, okay? So first thing, and that you may not know this except for I'm telling you this, we're going to start with 7 and 3. Okay, so my second statement, I guess, is going to be angle 7 is congruent to angle 3. Can any of you tell me why we know that? What'd you say? Corresponding, good. And we're going to say the whole statement. If lines are parallel, then corresponding angles are congruent. They told us that the lines were parallel right here. So because we know those lines are parallel, that's why I'm starting my next statement with if lines are parallel. If lines are parallel, then corresponding angles congruent. Everybody good so far? Okay, next, I want to change it. Instead of being these angles are congruent, I'm going to have to do some like M of angle 7, not just angle 7. So let's change these to measure of angle 7 is equal to measure of angle 3. Do you remember what it's called when we switch between angles are congruent to angles are equal? Not transitive. Definition of congruent angles, yes. Definition of congruent angles. By definition, if the angles are congruent, we can say that their measures are equal. If vice versa, if their measures are equal, we can say that they're congruent. Definition of congruent angles. Okay, now in a second we're going to end. So I want to start getting angle 2 involved. So now I'm going to say, okay, how do angle 2 and angle 3 relate to each other? How do angle 2 and angle 3 relate to each other? What's their relationship? What's the relationship between 2 and 3? linear pair. We've done this a bunch of times today, guys. We gotta start seeing those linear pairs when they're right next to each other. Those are linear pairs. When it's like 3 and 6, when there's all that space in between them, those are consecutive. When they're directly next to each other, those are linear pair. We gotta start recognizing those. Now, linear pairs are what? Supplementary, very good. So we're gonna write that statement. We're gonna say measure of angle 2 plus measure of angle 3 equals 180. And the reason we're allowed to say that is because linear pair suck. And then now we're on this very last step. So why on step 4 could I say measure of angle 2 plus measure of angle 3 equals 180? And then on step 5, I could say measure of angle 2 plus measure of angle 7 equals 180. What changed between line 3 and 4? Or 4 and 5, excuse me? What changed between line 4 and 5? Measure. One of the measures. Lila, what'd you just say? Substitution. Because we replaced that 3 and the 7 together, we call that substitution. Whenever you're doing it with the plus 2 angles that add to 180, it's always going to be substitution. And I'm going to tell you a lot of the proofs that we have are going to end in substitution. A lot of those proofs are going to end in substitution. Now, because 2 and 3 are both, I've given you some pieces, we're going to skip those for now because I think you can try those on your own. Can we jump down to number 1 at the bottom? And we'll do maybe this one together, and then I'll kind of let you guys go for the rest of class. Okay. This one, it says, given L is parallel to M and 2 is congruent to 4, okay? You can do this one of 2 ways. You can write those both on one step, or you can separate them out. If I'm writing my own proof, I'm just gonna write them on one step. So I'm gonna start with my given is L is parallel to M. And I can say angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. And we'll just call that same step given. All right, I don't know how many steps we have, so we're gonna kind of go through this together. Let's first label our picture. So I'm gonna label L as parallel to M. So I put those little arrows on them, I highlighted them in yellow. And I'm also gonna mark that 2 and 4 are congruent. Okay, I wanna end with 3 and 4 are congruent. Do you see if 3 is congruent to something already? Three and what other angle do I already know are congruent? Sam? 3 and 1 are congruent.
Oh.
3 and 2. And I would let Sam do 3 and 1, but then we'd have to do another step to show 1 and 2 are congruent. It's even easier if we can just go and say 2 and 3 are congruent. Sam, why are 2 and 3 congruent? Alternate interior. So we can directly on step 2 say that angle 2 and 3 are congruent. And we can say that because of our postulate, our theorem that we learned yesterday, if lines are parallel, then what was my relationship between 2 and 3? Alternate interior, good. So alternate interior angles are congruent. All right, I actually think we're ready to be done now. We've got one more step. I think that we can prove that angle 4 is congruent to angle 3. We just said that they told us 2 and 4 were congruent. We just said that 2 and 3 were congruent. Why can I now say 4 and 3 are congruent? Because 2 and 4 are. Yeah, but I can't write that as my reason. That is part of my reason. Close, but I don't want to use substitution with congruent signs. Would you say? Transitive. We're going to use transitive. Every time we've got these congruent signs, we're going to use transitive. Every time we're adding these angles and we replace them, that's substitution. So these, what I basically wanted to show you today were two kind of similar concepts, so we'll call it transitive property of congruence. Let me finish it for you. I think the next one you can also solve pretty quickly. You're gonna have one step. I think you're gonna have 3 steps again on the next one. The next one is super similar to the one that we just did. What I'm gonna do though is I'm gonna be quiet, I'm gonna turn off the video, and we are gonna just work. I don't care if you work by yourself, with a neighbor, does not matter to me for the rest of class. I'm here to answer questions. I'll post a key probably after you turn this in so you guys can check your work, but this is just your practice time now. Okay?